everyone, thanks for joining us.
Hey all.
Hi.
Hi.
And hi to everyone out there on Facebook and YouTube and things. So just wanted to say hi and thank you for joining us. So today we're going to be joined by Dr. Rogers as well, so later on in a little bit. But we're also going to focus today's talks about elephants and the most recent elephant module that has been released from Dr. Rogers. And just going to quickly talk a little bit about a herd. Actually, is Peter ready yet?
Yes, he is.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll get Peter on board and we can chat about that now.
I'm Peter Rogers. I'm a wildlife vet working largely in the Greater Kruger Park. And this is why we do what we do. This is not a 9-to-5 job. This is my hobby and it's my passion. And I live my hobby.
Hi, Peter.
Yes, Roger, how are you?
Good, how are you?
No, right, a little bit fluey, but fine otherwise, eh?
Oh, no.
Yeah.
No.
Too much
Nice
stress.
to see you.
Oh, dear.
So yeah, as we were saying, we're going to talk about elephants today because Peter's new elephant module is completed and up, which is fabulous. So we're going to talk about herd, not the word herd, but the acronym, is it an acronym? HERD, which stands for Head Spray and Elephant Rehabilitation and Development Gopama Private Game Reserve. And this is kind of what Peter's kind of talking a lot about in his module. So, Peter, did you kind of want to introduce it a little bit?
Yeah, the Hoedspruit, that herd actually originated from the Camp Jabulani elephant interaction side of things on Gopama, and then we were sent elephant orphans, because we were the logical place to send them to, and they are really, really difficult to manage. You'll see when we start talking about it in more detail just now, elephant calves are really, really difficult. And so we've been getting quite a few in recently, well, over the years, most of them that have been caught in snares. So they are really, really, as I say, you'll see when we speak about it just now, they are really difficult to rear. They to get the right milk mixture is really difficult, and I firmly believe that if you've got an elephant calf, an orphan, and you clone it, so you've got two individuals standing next to each other, the one will thrive on the milk formula, the other one will die. There doesn't appear to be any pattern. So, and they're highly stress susceptible as well. So there's not a lot that is known about them, but so that makes it even more difficult. And then the other one that Roger was referring to, Fishan. Fishan means the short one. He came from Zim. He was one of those that would have been killed in the land grabs, and he was one of the ones we got out safely. But he actually fell into he actually broke his ulna, and that's actually what happened to him, and we managed to get him right. So those are the two elephants that Roger spoke to me about earlier. So I'm not quite sure what other detail he wants me to go into about those two.
So Peter, I'm just going to show a little quick video about Fenya, and then maybe you could just explain a little bit more details. I know,
okay.
The outcome wasn't fantastic and pretty sad that side, but
yes.
I'm just gonna show a quick video, and then maybe you could go into a bit more details about it.
Sure.
So here we are at Herd, the Hoedspruit Elephant Research and Development Orphanage, just outside Hoedspruit, with Adine, the owner, Adine Rhino. This little elephant came in last night. It had been caught in a snare, and it was darted in the Greater Kruger and brought through by a vet, Dr. Gerrit Skeppers, who offloaded it here last night. So we came out here today. He took off the snare, but he wasn't able to actually clean up the wounds. So we've done a standing sedation with her, and we've managed to clean up the wounds nicely. Most importantly, she's very dehydrated, so we've been able to give her a drip. Intravenous drip. By the time we finished, about 15 liters would have gone in, and then just clean up the wounds with peroxide and chlorhexidine, and put some Stockholm tar on just to kill the maggots and to keep the flies away. And basically given her vitamins and minerals, more antibiotics and anti-inflammatories. So So this was basically just for the first aid. When it gets a little bit stronger and more hydrated and starting to eat, then we'll actually, this big gap on top here where the cable was, it's about this wide. You're going to suture it together. Because this ear at the moment is not really working. You can see that the cartilage here at the back is, you can see the cartilage actually torn here. So what we might do next time is try and to get these, or somehow get some of these edges together and see if you know that can work. It will never ever be 100%, but at least if we can get some more strength in this ear, that it can actually start flapping again. And then underneath here was the main wound. You can see I've got like a cotton wool swab in here. You can see the maggots even coming out now. A whole lot of them, this black stuff, the Stockholm tar will kill them and it'll stop any others coming in. But there are literally hundreds in there. You know, you can spend 2 days trying to get them out, but this, what we've done, will kill them all. So I'm not worried about that at all. So yeah, I think we've arrested the development of any further infection or inflammation. And the maggots, to me, are probably the most important thing here, that we've got rid of them. So we'll look at it over another 5 days or so, and we'll check. Because the next time we'll have to actually immobilize it completely, and so we can actually clean that properly from underneath, and then we'll suture that closed. So all right.
Awesome. Thank you, Doc.
But it shows how weak she really was, because I mean that dose we used of BAM was not high at all. See, she's starting to wag her tail. See that, Joshua, when the elephants wag their tail like that, it's about to charge. Yeah. And they wag their tail like that.
You've got elephant experience.
Doc, can you tell us about the blue spray you use, please?
Okay, that blue spray, what it is, it's just an antibiotic spray. It's a oxytetracycline spray. And the blue is just, it's a marker, so you can see where you've actually sprayed. The antibiotic itself is colorless, but the blue just shows you where you've actually sprayed it on. And it does tend to dry out the superficial wounds as well.
Awesome. So yeah, Peter, tell us more. What happened? What unfortunately did happen to Fenya?
Yeah, this was the most recent little calf that we got in. We got her in about, I'm trying to think now, about a month ago. She came from a reserve on the western side of Kruger Park, in the Greater Kruger Park, one of the private reserves, and she'd been caught in a snare. Obviously, the rest of the herd left her. We don't know how long she was on her own before they found her, but she'd broken the snare and she was walking around, and but she was in shocking condition. And a colleague of mine darted her at night, and they transported her through to our little hospital, if you like to call it, a herd. And she was pretty aggressive when she got there. The video you saw was the next day. Obviously, she had been sedated. We did a standing sedation, which will come in not this next module coming up, but the one after that, the standing sedation, which worked really, really well. You can't handle her otherwise. And also to knock her down, to make her lie down and sleep with the M99 is very risky. So if you can do all of this with a standing sedation like we did there, it's much better. And obviously, because of it being such poor condition, the risk of an anesthetic is very, very high. So that you can actually kill her with because her resistance is so low. Now, when she came in, it was clear that she'd been on her own probably for I'd say 2 to 3 weeks. Still very small. I think we estimated her about 6 months of age or something. So still heavily dependent on mother's milk, and she was just browsing, and she was literally anorexic. If you look at her plasma albumin was down at about 16 or something, and she was very anemic as well. So, she needed intensive treatment, and of course the wounds. One always tends to look at the wounds, and if people say, it's the wounds this and the wounds that, but it's not so much the wounds; it's what's going on inside that body. The anemia, the hypoalbuminemia. Those are the critical things. The wounds one can sort out, but it's to quickly try and sort out the physiological deficits that she had. So what we did immediately is we took blood using a standing sedation again from another one of the Camp Jabalani elephants, and we gave it to her, and it perked her up immediately. But you know, unfortunately, it's just not enough. And then you've got to try and get them to drink, you know, and it's totally foreign. They're obviously not used to drinking from a bottle. They're not used to drinking a milk surrogate. Nobody really knows what the correct recipe is for these little elephants. So, and they are highly stress susceptible. We measured her cortisol levels, and they were absolutely sky high. They can develop ulcers. And one must remember that they're herd animals. You know, they're not meant to be on their own. And so when she comes in, we've got keepers with her, Zimbabwean guys who are very knowledgeable, very sympathetic and empathetic. And they're with her 24/7. We've got a sheep, but she just tried to kill the sheep a few times as company. So it's an uphill battle from the word go. She was very dehydrated. I think we gave her 12 liters the first day, and the third day another 12 liters, plus the blood transfusion, plus antibiotics. And she did have very bad injuries, particularly the one you saw, the one under the throat, where the maggots actually falling out. Now there were hundreds of maggots in there. It's not really worthwhile, in my opinion, in my experience, trying to get every single maggot out, because an animal would have had a birthday by the time you've got all the maggots out. So what we do is I just spray them with an insecticide, clean out the wound as best I can, and allow the maggots to fall out on their own, because to try and get every single one out, it's just it's very time consuming. And to be very honest, you can spend that time you've got available with the anesthetic or the sedation doing something much more constructive. So you saw the maggots falling out. We use an insecticide. I also inject her with an ivermectin. You guys, I'm sure, have all heard about the ivermectin for the COVID, but an ivermectin compound called Dectamax, and that kills all the maggots, and it kills all the worms inside her as well. So it was just symptomatic treatment, but we were on the back foot to start off with. You know, they are so when any of these wild animals, even if they're in good condition, you bring them into captivity. I found, you know, during routine captures, rhinos, you name it, impala, whatever, any other species, you bring a wild animal into captivity. For the first 3 weeks, for the first 2 to 3 weeks, they lose weight. It doesn't matter how well they're eating, what condition they are, and only after that do they start picking up weight again. So with her, we didn't have that sort of luxury of 2 weeks to play with. You know, that sort of she didn't have any reserves. Excuse me. She didn't have any reserves whatsoever. So we couldn't get enough food into her to actually to keep her going, even just on a daily basis, plus all the stress. So we had her, I think we had her probably for about 8 days or so. And, you know, plenty of TLC and drips, and putting all our sort of knowledge that we have up until now to work. And unfortunately, on, I don't know, about 8 or 9 or whatever, I can't remember, she just went down and couldn't get up. So we unfortunately had to euthanize her. But yeah, it was a very, very sad story, you know, and it's a very costly affair, but that doesn't really come into it, because the owner of Herd, Ardeen Roeder, is a very compassionate lady, and she's got lots of contacts, and you know, they managed to get sponsorships, and even if she doesn't, she uses her own funds to actually sponsor or to try and get these little animals through. But they are very, very difficult, and you know, there's very few that we've actually got through. And I'm seriously trying to rethink the actual recipe for the milk. I know the Americans, who I've got a huge amount of respect for, because those guys are really clever, and they've got a lot of practical experience in their zoos and safari parks. They made an elephant milk substitute called Grover's, and that doesn't work either. So, you know, we rely on very much like sort of hearsay. Like, you know, in Kenya, for example, they talk about using S26, or, you know, these human milk replacement, baby milk replacement formulas. And they say they've got good success, but they don't tell you about how many they lost. They only tell you about the ones that came through. And I think the same, in the East, where they use those Indian elephants, Asian elephants, I think the same there as well.
Do you think can I just ask, do you think there just isn't a big enough kind of market for it for people to bother to develop it further? There's just too few people who do this kind of thing. Do you think that's why nobody's developed a better one? Or just everybody's just struggling?
No, I think you've hit the nail on the head. There are very few places that actually, do this sort of, involved in these sort of operations. So I don't think it warrants, unless somebody's going to do a PhD or something, like one of you girls going to do a PhD. The thing is, we pretty much know the composition of elephant milk, but it changes as it goes through the lactation. They're highly allergic to normal cow's milk, to the butterfat. So the closest that we can get to the elephant butterfat is coconut oil. So none of it's perfect, So, and I think the stress of these little things plays a huge role. And normally when we get them, they are compromised. We've had them in snares, we've had them where they've been stuck in drains, we've had them where they've been stuck in the mud for days. So, when we do get them, we're pretty much on the back foot anyway. It's not as though we get a calf that's been rejected by its mother and is a few hours old, and it's not, some of these animals 6 months old, that animal is wild, and it's highly stressed and they're highly intelligent. So, for example, to compare it to a rhino calf is I don't want to tempt fate, but it is so easy to rear them. They are very, very uncomplicated, and I can't tell you why, but they're very, very uncomplicated. We use just normal skim milk with them, skim cow's milk and glucose and a couple of probiotics, and that's about it. With the elephant, it's a totally different kettle of fish. I always say that sheep and elephants and horses, they all love dying. They all try their best to die all the time. Horses with colic, sheep with whatever, and elephants, these little calves are so difficult. Okay, I see there's a question there.
Yes, Joanna, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, I was just wondering about the snares. So I was just wondering if there's a common material that is used. Everyone talks about wire snares, but I don't know if there's a different things that are used. And then if there are some materials which then increase the rate of infection, because obviously if you've got a snare that's been around a leg or something for weeks at a time, there's there's going to be flies, there's going to be maggots, there's probably going to be infection. But I wondered if there was any materials that enhance infection, if that makes sense, and just make it progress much faster.
Yeah, I think it's you could probably compare it to almost like suture materials. If you've got a multi-filament suture material and you use it in an infected wound, the infection gets in between those little filaments. That's why in an infected wound, you don't want to use something like catgut or one of these other ones that are multi-filament. You want to use a monofilament suture material because the bacteria cannot hide inside the suture material. And it's the same with the snares. A lot of these snares that we get are stainless steel. They're not set for elephants, they're set for other animals. It's meat poachers per se. And they set them, say, for buffalo or whatever. And the elephant is just I'd say collateral damage. And the thing is with the elephants is that why we see these snares so commonly, and with lions, and with wild dogs, and with hyenas, is because fences don't stop these animals. So they get out of protected areas, and that's when they get, involved in these areas which are not protected anymore. And people set snares, but mainly for bushmeat, and this is where the elephants pick up these snares. So the cables, the stainless steel snares are bad. They're usually around the trunk or around the leg. In this other module, which I'm almost done with, Roger, you'll be pleased to know. I've got lots of examples. Then the other one we've got is the cable snare. Now, it's a multi-filament or multi-filament snare. Now, those cables they're stolen from the railway lines. or they like brake cables for the trains, or brake cables, and those are like multi-filament, and those cables are they tend to cause more, and it's quite right what you said. They get filled with pus inside, and so the infection is very difficult to get rid of, while it's still on. But once these snares, once the wire or cable is off, they tend to heal very, very quickly. And I know I've mentioned it before. We as veterinarians take a lot of credit for these animals, actually recovering. But Mother Nature is unbelievable. The healing power of these animals. I mean, human beings are useless. If we had some sort of an injury like this little Fenya, she had an injury that went right in. The knot was right in. You could see the trachea. In fact, there was even a little slit in the trachea, and sometimes when she was breathing, you could hear the sort of whistling, And the next thing I was going to do was to actually, when she got stronger, was to actually close this hole, suture it closed. But I could see, all the vital structures there, the carotid artery, the jugular, all the nerves, everything was there, exposed. And people worry about those injuries, but that is not the problem. The problem is really what's going on inside the animal. The injury, that takes time. Time we've got, but with the physiological parameters, we don't have time, and we're always on the back foot. I don't know whether we haven't seen it. The little albino one we got, Kanyisa. I don't know whether we haven't discussed her yet, Roger. She was one we've got now. We've got her just prior to Fenya. The same thing. She had a snare through her mouth. She features in this next module. She had a snare in her mouth and then behind her ears. So she couldn't eat, she couldn't drink, she couldn't do anything. And she's also tried very hard to die, but we haven't allowed her yet. So she's doing quite well. I don't know what they call it, not really albino, she's leucistic or leucistic. You girls know all the right words. She's doing well, but she has her setback. She's luckily with the habituated herd at the moment. So there is a hierarchy that looks after her. So she's in a herd situation. So from that point of view, her stress is minimal. But even from the milk she's getting now, she still periodically gets diarrhea. So I think with the next one we get, I'm going to try and convince the powers that be that side just to go back to basics. And we'll start with the skim milk with lactase to break down the lactose, coconut oil, and see where we are. Because at the moment we're using very, very expensive human milk surrogates and stuff that's been, with the allergies and that, the babies that are so allergic, hyperallergic babies. The stuff is really expensive, but we are getting it sponsored. But yeah, it's an uphill battle because as I say, we're on the back foot all the time.
Yeah, I'll ask my question then. So I was just thinking, so you were just talking about obviously the elephant that came in, Fenya, I think she was called, she was orphaned. But I was wondering whether you ever had a situation where an elephant is injured but isn't orphaned, and then would you try and keep them with their herd or their parent and try and treat them more in the field, or try and keep them together?
Yes.
And then if my second half of the question was if they are orphaned, do you ever have any issues kind of getting them used to going into the herd that you mentioned, and how you overcome that?
All right. So normally, and again, it's in this next. This is where I'm battling because I've got a whole lot of videos of one I did in December. Roger's seen them, and I've got my girls here helping me trying to get these things onto Google Drive and from there onto Loom and all these big words that I don't know. But it's a very nice video where it shows, and we do this too often, I would imagine, in the sense that we do it a lot. Is that the people report that like a calf with a snare. And what we do is we go and we dart it from the air, and then we just chase the herd off a little bit, treat it, and then we just leave it, with the herd around. But the ones that we get in have not been noticed, and they're left wandering around, for weeks on end. The ones that have got snares around their legs, they tend to be able to keep up to a point. But the ones with the snares, around their necks and through their mouths, they can't suckle, they can't do anything, and that's when the herd leaves them. And, unless somebody sees them straight away, that it comes to the point now where we've got this last one in such poor condition. But yeah, we try and leave them if they're not, when I say orphaned, I mean that not that the parents have been shot, orphaned in the sense that the herd have left them. They just can't, obviously they've been, it takes a while to break that snare, so it might take a couple of days. They might be stuck to the tree for 3 or 4 days, and by which time the herd has already left them. So yeah, nature, you can never beat Mother Nature, and we always try and keep the herd united, the baby united with the herd.
No, that's fair.
The second part of your question was, all right, so this habituated herd, I don't know, I have spoken about it before, but just for those of you who haven't heard about it, this Cap Jabulani is it's a herd of habituated elephants that came out of Zimbabwe. Forgive me if I'm repeating it to you, but the parents or the mothers were in the culling program in Wankie Game Reserve in the northern part of Zimbabwe. These youngsters were left, or they were left behind after the culling. So either you've got to shoot the youngsters, cull them as well, or you've got to try and rear them and maybe rehabilitate them. But that's another whole discussion on its own. So these ones, there were about 15 of them, were rescued from the cull. They were reared. They were a little bit bigger than the ones that we're getting. And then with the land grabs in Zimbabwe in 2000, these animals were going to get killed. So we went up and we fetched them and we brought them down to Kapama Game Reserve. And that's where we've kept them. Really a sanctuary for them, but it's really nice in the sense that Kapama Game Reserve is about 30,000 acres. And these elephants, they don't roam the whole 30,000 acres, but most of the day, 90% of the day, they're out free roaming with their handlers, and then they come back in the evenings. They used to use them for elephant back riding. Personally, I don't have a problem with that, but there is a huge issue. Again, that's another discussion for another day. So they don't do that anymore, but they do allow people to interact with them and walk with them and that sort of thing. So they are habituated, they're not tamed, because you don't tame any wild animal, you train it, you don't tame it. You must always be careful, because at the end of the day, somewhere along the line, there's going to be a human casualty if you regard them as tame. So what is really nice about having this habituated herd right there on site is that you can gradually introduce this. Once the animal is stabilized, the orphan calf is stabilized, you can gradually introduce it into the herd. And you must see the reactions, from the day it comes in. The habituated herd, they don't see it, but they know it's there. They can smell it, but this little thing is so stressed, you don't want to add more stress to it. So but after a while, once it's settled down, we introduce it to the habituated herd, which is what we've done now. So the habituated herd helps us in two scenarios where we can take blood and plasma from them to supplement the one that's the little one that's come in, and we do it almost every time. And then secondly, for you can call it the rewilding or the reintroduction into a herd. So that's the background. So we've got the best of both worlds there. And the facility itself that you saw the video, it's world class. I promise you, you can eat off the floor of those facilities. So there's no cost spared. The standards are so high.
So a question about you using the herd for like blood and plasma transfusion. Do you have to blood match in elephants, like blood type, the same way you do in humans?
No, look, I think there are different types. It's the same with dogs and cats and that sort of thing. You can give it blood transfusion once. We find that with the first transfusion is not a problem. Humans, you have huge, but humans are useless. They're just as bad as horse, sheep, and elephants. They're the same. But we give blood transfusions to. I've done it with roan and sable and rhinos and these elephants as well. So, but you can do it once. If you do it the second time, then you may run into problems with an anaphylactic type of reaction, allergic type reaction. Yeah. feels a bit quiet. No other
Well, I think you've
questions?
got a video to show, Roger.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, Pete, a lot of questions that come up is like, why does a pressure sore form? And what exactly, is a pressure sore?
Yeah, you see in a case like Fishan, when he hurt his leg like that, that's the side he was lying on all the time, and he spends more time than usual lying on that side. So what happens is it actually puts pressure, the skin, and it's onto, if there's very little muscle like over that area, it's pressure straight onto the bone. So normally you've got what they call a bursa, where there's a little bit of fluid here just to lubricate the tendons. So when the animal walks, that the tendons are able to contract and relax freely. But when he lies on it, there's pressure all the time. So this bursa produces more fluid than normal. And it keeps on producing, and it keeps on, and then eventually the skin at the top, because of the pressure, those little blood vessels that supply that skin die. So you've got a patch of dead skin, necrotic skin, and that's where it opens to the top, and that fluid all drains that way.
But Fishan is lying on that side that's actually sore.
Yeah.
Why does he lie on that side?
Yeah, because he's got more flexibility in the leg that hasn't been affected. So in his case, the broken leg the leg that was broken is the left front leg. So he lies on that left side, and he can use, when he gets up, he can use the right leg because it can actually bend and flex, and it's less painful, so he can stand up much easier.
So it actually makes sense for him to just lie that one side.
Yeah. And obviously he's lying more than usual on that side because of the pain, or the pain that was. At the moment, I don't think so. That you can see that pressure sore, it's mainly like scar tissue inside. There's a little bit of fluid, so I don't think he's spending that much time. But that you can call it an injury if you like. Is going to be there. It's going to be there forever because of the scar tissue. Hopefully, we can get the hole to close. But if it doesn't, it's not the end of the world either. It actually doesn't look bad at all.
Okay. So, we're cleaning it daily.
Yeah.
Is that a good thing to clean it, to get the pus out? Because we're basically worried about, the pus forming and getting some maggots in there.
Yeah, look, it's quite a neat little hole. It's very unlikely the maggots, but cleaning it out every day will be good. And, apparently he's used to it. We've got that little pipette now. Just stick it in there and you can just flush it every day. But it's hardly, you can hardly say there's even an infection in there because it's draining all the time. So it's, if you can put it that way, it's a nice wound.
Okay. Is that wound painful for him?
I don't think so. Maybe when they flush it out, it's a little bit, uncomfortable. But he'll get used to it. There's no pain there. Definitely not. No.
So it's more tender,
Well, it's just uncomfortable, but not. It'll be uncomfortable while they're working on it. But the rest of the time, you won't feel anything.
Okay.
I think we're more worried about it than what he.
Basically, why does it create the pus?
Okay, so when the hole opens, obviously there's and of course remember they go and swim in the dams a lot, and the dams are not sterile, the water, so you get bacteria going in there, and so you do get a secondary infection. But the fact that it drains like that, again, it's just an aesthetic thing. It looks worse than what it really is.
So, and we don't have basically a timeline when when it will kind of heal or be healed.
No, it's not causing him any discomfort. So it will heal when it wants to. It may never close completely, but it may as well. But it's neither here nor there. If you can just keep it clean every day, from an aesthetic point of view, but really it's not a big issue.
Does those heaps, actually help, to kind of reduce the weight, that he puts on lying on that side?
Yeah, definitely will. And also what's good is that when he lies on that heap like that, it actually presses on that thing and squeezes all the pus and stuff out. And then also by lying like that, as you say, there's less weight on that injury, and it's also easier for him to stand up again.
Okay. And then just, is this a common thing that we see in elephants or rhinos, to have when they're injured?
Yeah, one must remember that these elephants are essentially free roaming, most of the day. So what you're seeing there is typically a wild elephant. The fact that it's habituated to people makes no difference to that wound at all. That wound would have occurred in the wild because of the exact amount of time that they do spend, the extra amount of time that they spend lying on that side. So it's a totally natural phenomenon.
That's on.
Literally so amazing.
Yeah, you see, if you look at that lump, I spoke about a bursa. You guys, it's almost like water on the knee or something like it. It's just continual pressure on that place, and it does. What happens? As I said, people are always worried about the wounds, and it's those wounds. They may look terrible in that, but they really don't affect the animal that much. But with time, what happens there is that the body's response is to heal it with scar tissue, fibrous tissue. So that's almost a pad, so that when the animal does go and lie on that side, it just prevents more trauma happening. But you can see there now that wound is pretty much closed up completely. But you don't want to fiddle too much. That was my whole point there. You don't want to fiddle too much with these things. It's not worth getting stressed because there's a little bit of pus coming out and antibiotics and all that sort of thing. It'll sort itself out, and if you've got people looking at it, just wipe it. I talk about pus. It's not even a quarter of a teaspoon a day. It's nothing. It's got a little bit of white around the edges, and that's actually the owner of Herd in Camp Jabulani, Ardeen Roeder. She was the lady who was interviewing me there. That's why I did that interview for free.
So I had a bit of a question about, obviously, elephants are very heavy and can't really deal with having uneven weight on limbs and things like that. So I was just wondering if there was a sort of age or size or weight cutoff, at which point, if an elephant had broken a leg, that you would say, we can't cast this, it either needs to be put to sleep or we need to come up with another solution.
Yeah, no, look, that's an excellent question, and I get confronted with that sort of quandary or same situation in other animals, all the time. The one thing, there's two things in my mind is firstly, is the animal suffering? Okay, so, and if he is suffering, our suffering is, and I'm sure I've said it before, is in this case would be pain. Then the other things, like suffering, like starvation, thirst, extreme temperatures, not being able to react with same individuals of the same species, etc., like that. So, in most cases, it's to do with pain. And then put it on the other side. The other option is putting an animal down. In other words, it's dead. And if you're dead for a long time. So, I always say, where there's life, there's hope. Monitor it. If you can't make a decision right away, if you're not sure of it, just give it a bit of time. Now, firstly, if this had happened in the wild to a wild elephant, we would never have done anything about it. The fact that he was a habituated elephant, it makes it much more manageable. First, we had to get a diagnosis. We weren't sure what it was, and that's where we got a really strong X-ray machine, and we found out that it was actually a fracture of the ulna, and he must have stood in a very deep hole or something like that to cause this injury. So we were able to limit his movement without stressing him too much. He didn't have to be with the rest of the herd all the time, and we put like a piping type of thing with like a brace around his leg. And that lasted a few days, and it came off. But if you can alleviate the pain while the fracture is healing, then you are, I would say, very close to 100% of the way there. if you can allow the animal, that leg to heal without the animal suffering, and when I say suffering here, I mean pain and only pain, nothing else. He's not worried about the herd comes back to him all the time. And that was my my sort of yardstaff. Is this animal suffering? And when I say suffering, I mean pain. Sure, he was in a bit of pain, but we used strong painkillers to get him through it. And, you know, I think if he was really in a lot of pain, he would have been very aggressive. He seemed to just carry on with his, like, sort of, I won't say daily routine, but he, you know, he lay down a lot. And Adine spoke about that mound, that heap of sand. That you know, that's what elephants also often do, is they lie up against an ant heap or something like that. So he was able to lie down a lot and then get up easier, because he was lying at probably 30 degrees, you know, and not flat. And he seemed fine. His appetite was good. And again, we, you know, I might have been completely wrong. I mean, we're using human parameters. I'm looking at him for signs of pain, and maybe he doesn't show the same signs of pain as was what I'm used to. But in my opinion, he was pretty happy. And, you know, we did follow up x-rays, and he healed very well. And he's still a little bit swollen. And initially, when he was on his own, he did lag behind the herd a little bit, but then they stopped the herd and got him again. But now he's up and about, he's with them all the time. So I believe he probably did suffer a little bit. He did suffer pain initially, and maybe for some time. But it wasn't, I don't think it was severe. And, you know, by all the sort of characteristics that I would judge pain by, he seemed to be fine. So in the wild like that, it certainly would never have worked. And the bigger the animal, the more pressure on the limb. So all of those sort of things play a huge role. Smaller, younger animals, you know, obviously heal a lot better. But in this case, you know, it was time really, and pain-free time, or I won't say painless, pain-free, but minimal pain, but time. You know, 6 weeks, 2 months, and limiting his exercise. You know, obviously with a broken bone. And the ulna is not that bad, because the ulna is really held in position by the radius. So the ulna, there's not much room for movement. So it's really the radius actually acts as a splint, if you like. So we just had to give him time for the healing to go, and it's absolutely fine now. He hates me as much as ever.
I mean, I guess you were just covering this a bit as you were just talking about it. But I was just wondering how long these kind of more like the pressure sores tend to heal, and are they like particularly persistent? And if they've have a pressure sore, are they more likely to develop them again in the same area? Like, does that area become more likely to get them, or does it just tend to be a byproduct at the time of that more internal injury?
Yeah, it's just, I think you can associate it with one particular event, you know, like with him in this case, but I've had it in other elephants as well, like these ones that came from the same group that came from Zim. We had 1 or 2, and when they arrived with them, and the reason there was, I think they were lying on a very hard surface, like a concrete stable at night, and they spent a lot of time lying on those hard surfaces. So it's not something that's going to reoccur, because I think once you've seen it, you know what caused it, and you can, if it's something like a hard surface, like concrete that they're lying on, you think, hey, this is a problem, and make another plan. So they usually once-off things, but they do take a long time to heal. And I've seen it in other species. Look, we're talking about exactly the same sort of thing in human beings that are bedridden, you know, for whatever reason. And it's all to do with circulation, as I mentioned, you know, the circulation being cut off to that particular area of the skin, and it's usually on a bony prominence. And interestingly, now last week I had it in 2 cheetahs as well, and they were both. It's interesting. It's just things that you never stop learning. If a cheetah is hand-reared, they don't, and this is only my opinion, not scientifically at all. If a cheetah is hand-reared, the muscles, you know, on those, in the hips and at the hind legs, because they don't exercise that much, the muscles are not that well developed. So the bony protuberances of the pelvis, you know, the tubercocci on the sides, and the ischiatic at the back, they're much more prominent. So if they do tend to spend a lot of time, like the one-hat cubs that I'm talking about, they tend to lie down a lot because the cubs are suckling. She developed pressure sores, and then there was another one that because we're really putting a big emphasis now on trying to get cheetahs back into the wild. And interestingly enough, just as an aside here, is that India is wanting to restock their reserve with cheetahs. So that's going to be a massive operation. So there's more and more focus about getting cheetahs into the wild, although the wild is shrinking all the time. But we're making more and more concerted efforts to get them in. So I had another one now that came from another center somewhere else in South Africa and was released on a client of mine's farm. And the same with her. She battled to hunt for herself, and what actually happened was that she started losing weight, and they called me, and we darted, and I could feel there was a foreign body inside her stomach, a mass. So I thought maybe it's grass or something. But anyway, we had to open her up, and I opened her up, and it was all hair, fur, and skin. So I think she was battling to find food, and she scavenged on an impala carcass, and she just got the skin and bits of bone and fur in. So that was the problem there. But now, while she was in hospital, she was lying down all the time, and the same thing, she started developing these pressure sores. So on last Friday, in fact, we took her out because we'd had quite a bit of rain, and it's not going away from the rainy season. I was just worried about putting her out into an area, where she's exposed to the elements. But we put her out last week, but she had just the beginnings of those pressure sores. So got to watch them really, really carefully.
So I've got a question. So is there any research that's been done in captive elements, or I guess any other captive large animals who are more because in captivity, is it that they're more susceptible to the pressure sores of small enclosures, such as what you say, like with cheetahs and while they're hospitalized? And is any of this research helping in terms of the conditions and things that you need to avoid these kind of injuries?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not aware of any research on the pressure sores, but I would imagine that in zoos and that, it probably does occur more often. I think also because they've got hard surfaces in the zoos, but I think there again they might have learned over the years to provide them with more giving sort of maybe planks or some sort of a floor that's got more give in it, and also the fact that it's a small area, you get a bigger increased bacterial buildup, so the chances of those sort of wounds becoming infected are pretty good. But I'm not aware of any papers that have been written on that. And then again, the pressure sores, you will get them in the wild, but again, in the wild, we're sitting in the Kruger Park, just for example, with 30,000 elephants. If an elephant gets a pressure sore from whatever, you don't, and it's not a once-off treatment. If you're going to treat it, you've got to do it a few times. So if it's in a free roaming situation and it's not a man-made situation, you leave it. Difficult as that may be, you can't treat every single wound. So the wild animals we just leave. It's the ones that we can actually treat on a regular basis, because these pressure sores, if you're going to treat them, it can be years. The one that came out of Zimbabwe, got in 2000. She had pressure sores on left and right. Well, they were like sort of just bumps to start off with on the left and right elbows, and they both ulcerated. And those, I think, took more than 10 years to heal. Just keeping it clean on the outside, the fly worry and that sort of thing. No antibiotics or anything, but they did close up in the end. They look worse than what they really are.
So another question, slightly unrelated, but I guess it's still with elephants. So Roger just put it up on the screen, but
yeah.
So there's been a recent article that have said that the African elephants are now being recognized as two separate species, the savanna elephants and the forest elephants. And the move is basically that they are different. They do have different phenotypes, but it's also that they've both moved into critically endangered and endangered IUCN list, which means that the conservation efforts can focus a bit differently. What are your thoughts on this? Do you agree that they're different species? And in your experience, do you know, I guess
the forest elephants, I've spoken to people who've worked with them. They're very aggressive because they poached a lot. But if you look at them, they are different. They do look different. So I would agree. I know Roger just sent this article, the same article to me recently, I know it is, and there's a lady that who stays here in Hoedspruit who's actually working on them at the moment, and they certainly do look different, and the very fact that they actually inhabit different types of what do you call environments, would indicate already that there could be some sort of physiological as well as anatomical changes. I don't know whether they adapted more to the forest than savanna elephants, perhaps. But it's very interesting. And look, they are definitely endangered because they occur in an area, quite a limited area, and it's heavily poached. Whereas the African normal savanna elephant, where we are, where they're very well protected, we've actually got way too many elephants. So while elephants may be endangered worldwide, where we are, they most certainly are not. They are not at all. Not at all.
Yeah, that's part of what the article was saying, is that like the individual populations of elephants seem to be thriving and stuff, but it's not enough overall for to secure their future basically as a species. There's still a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of that.
Yeah, look, I mean that's the thing in Africa. Life is cheap, eh? And so an animal is seen as food. People are hungry, people are poor. Whereas in areas like where we are in South Africa, Botswana, to a lesser degree Zimbabwe, and then definitely Namibia also, the animals are protected, largely protected, and live in protected areas, which are well policed, well maintained. And so in those areas, we've actually got too many elephants. We're sitting in the about 20 years, so-called 25 years ago, a bit longer maybe, 25, 30 years ago, it was not possible to translocate adult elephants from one area to another just because of the sheer weight and the logistics in that. And, it was perfected by a guy called Clem Kutsia in Zimbabwe. And everybody said, you can never do it, but he did. And so, we've got specialized equipment now that is, it's very expensive, very heavy, very specific to adult elephants, but it is available, and we can move adult elephants, whole herds at a time. But having said that, now all the new areas that have become available for elephant conservation and restocking areas, they're all at their limit now. So the question again arises: what do you do now with all these animals, these so-called excess animals? And that's a big problem. So now we're contracepting the elephants as well. And that goes along with physiological challenges as well. Females just cycling and cycling and cycling and cycling. That'll be one of the later modules in elephants, because we use these vaccines that it kicks not an allergic reaction, but it's an immune reaction. When the female elephant, when she ovulates, the egg gets expelled, so she comes into season again. So it's all those behavioral changes that again influence what happens in a controlled environment.
Sorry. So we got another question. This was sent in last week or last month, but we didn't have time to answer it, so we're going to do it now. So from Maya. So hi to Dr. Rogers. In your opinion, are conservation projects for endangered species, such as the pangolin, receiving enough support from local governments? If not, why do you think this is? Very interesting.
Okay. I'll show you how much support we get from the government for all these endangered species. Where am I? Zip, zero, nothing. Not one single cent. Not one single cent. This is all privately driven. For example, we're doing these massive rhino dehorning projects at the moment. Not 1 cent from the government. Not one single cent. They don't care. Firstly, they've got a massive. In Africa, you're sitting with a massive overpopulation, unemployment, hunger, poverty. So all the money that's not stolen is given to the people. So animals rank nowhere, absolutely nowhere. So it's all privately driven by NGOs. A lot overseas, America, the UK. It's very sad, that conservation in Africa generally speaking, is left very much in the private hands to maintain it. The governments don't have the resources or the will, to be quite honest, to support these animals.
Yeah, I guess like you said, they don't care. There's not enough money in it, is there? They just don't have the resources. Another one from Maya. So when you were working on the cheetah breeding program, why did vitamin E deficiency cause such issues with breeding and high mortality in cheetah cubs? Thanks.
Okay, the vitamin E plays a major role in the body's immune system, and these animals were born. Again, this was all, in the sort of late 80s, early 90s, when very little was known. We've come on so much in these last sort of 25, 30 years. But these cheetah cubs were they were fed basically, or the mothers were fed basically just meat. And as you know, meat is not a source of your fat-soluble vitamins. The fat-soluble vitamins A, D, and E all sit in the liver. And these vitamins obviously did not get into the cheetah because she was only being fed meat. So the vitamin E, and also to a certain degree the vitamin A, mainly the vitamin E and D, play a big role in the development and maintenance of the body's immune system. So these cubs were born immunodeficient, and because of the meat was coming from feedlots, and feedlots, as you all probably well know, are heavily contaminated with salmonella bacteria, which comes from either carrier animals coming into these commercial feedlots, or rats, or being fed poultry litter. They fed poultry litter these cattle. So then these cubs were being infected, the mothers were being infected with salmonella, but because the mothers were okay, they didn't show any symptoms. But these cubs were infected shortly after birth with the salmonella, and because the immune system was so low, they died of a salmonella septicemia. But it took us ages to get to the diagnosis, because normally what happens when these cubs are born weak or dead, the mother eats them. And fortunately, one particular day, just after I started working at the Endangered Species Center, we found a couple of cubs that had just been born, and they died, and we flew them up to Pretoria. And we managed to get the diagnosis, and from there it was quite easy to rectify. But that's why there was like 100% mortality because of that vitamin E deficiency.
Right, Peter, thank you so much. We're going to do a little bit of a video now and do a bit of a changeover of some of the people that are joining us, because we're about to host a little journal club. But I know some of the girls have got just a quick question to ask you, and then after that, if you need to leave, you're obviously more than welcome to, because I know we've been running for an hour now.
No, I love it.
Brilliant. We're going to show a little video now, just introduce another topic that we got launching soon, which we're all very excited about, and just show you a little quick video about biomimicry, just very, very quickly. And then when that video is finished, we'll continue and pick it up with the Journal Club, and Kat will be taking over that. Okay, so let me just find the video, and we'll be back in a second.
An experience that reveals how nature is a vast library of ingenuity we can learn from. A library filled with proven, real solutions for all our human development and sustainability challenges. Solutions based on the billions of years of research and development by the natural world's designers, architects, engineers, and scientists. This is the science of biomimicry.
Fantastic. Okay, so over to our Journal Club, and over to you, Kat.
Hi. To everyone joining and stuff, we're just going to go through a paper that we found. It's looking at the development of behavioral welfare assessment tools for captive elephants. And so, Peter, just a question before we start. You mentioned that when you were assessing as to whether to cast or not, or if the animal is going to be in pain, and that the indicators are can be quite difficult to judge between species, obviously human to elephant in this case. So the question is, do you think that a behavioral, like a reliable, checked, and it's going to be like a well-researched behavioral tool that you can use to assess the welfare elements would be helpful in the veterinary aspect of, like, in hospitals and stuff?
I think it's difficult, as I say, there are ways of measuring it, I think, with like cortisone and all that sort of thing. But in the wild, we know a lot about the painkillers, and we know that, how effective they are. And I think, if you're using well-known, well-researched painkillers, and you look at the animal's behavior or reaction, I think that's pretty much good, good enough. I know it's not a great answer, but I think with experience, like over the years, I've seen a lot of things, and I know even just by I promise you, by the look on a horse's face or an elephant's face, that look in their eyes, I know. I know that's not scientific at all, but believe me, I can tell straight away, whether the animal's in a good space or not. But that's not scientific, I agree. And I'm not quite sure how one would measure those parameters there. I think cortisol, stress, but that's also like long-term.
No, absolutely. And I think in the paper we're about to look at, a lot of what they were looking at was some behavioral, some physical, and then some like physiological parameters. So they do a combination of them. But the aim there is welfare in captive elephants, in zoos and things like that. So it's obviously harder to translate across to wild elephants.
Yeah, it's very hard. The thing is, what I also judge, for example, like fish on, if the painkillers improve his habitus, you can just see if an animal's alive, or if he's, how he's doing, or he's depressed, and also if it improved his limp, little things. To me, that was a sign of success, and that we were on the right track. I just, people say you mustn't let an animal suffer. I agree fully, but if you remember that the other way out is death, maybe to let him just battle a little bit for a few days or something like that is a better option than just not giving it. What I mean is give him the benefit of the doubt, initially anyway. If you're not sure of the diagnosis, give him the benefit of the doubt. Give him the best painkillers that you can. Make it as comfortable for him in every possible way, even if it's antibiotics, just for the infection or anything like that. Just do everything in your power and give him time.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, to everyone watching, we'll get started with the Journal Club now. I'll just introduce, we've got Izzy and Nirvana here as well as co-chairs. And so, as I mentioned, the paper we're going to be looking at is looking at developing this behavioral welfare tool, with the focus being in captive zoo animals. But yeah, I'm just going to share my screen so we can all see this at the same time. Just give me a second.
In the meantime, Peter, while Kat's just getting the article up, if you want to stick around, obviously you're more than welcome to. If you need to shoot off, obviously completely understand. It's been fantastic speaking to you. Kat's just going to go through an article now and then talk about it a little bit with the panel, but you're more than welcome to stay. Completely up to you.
Okay.
Is that you wanted to stay, Peter, or not?
Yeah, no, I'll stay for a few minutes, definitely. I'd like to hear.
Yeah, no worries. Okay.
I'd like to hear somebody else talking.
Okay.
Okay.
Your article's on the screen now, Kat. Thanks.
Fab, and you can hear me all right. Cool. So this paper is open access, so anyone who wants to access it online is absolutely welcome to. The way that we're going to do it today is we're just going to have a brief look through the paper and some of the positives and some of the negatives of maybe their methods and techniques, and kind of how they got on, and kind of if they achieved what they wanted to. We're going to look through just a couple of points, like such as the figures, the methods, and all that, and just see how just our general thoughts on the paper. If anyone wants to comment at all during any of the times, feel free, go ahead. And Niv and Izzy, if you guys just let me know. Obviously, if you got, I'll mention you guys as well. But if you have anything else to say, just interrupt me anytime. If you've not read the paper, don't worry. It's pretty easy in terms of a read, and is not too bogged down with scientific words. So we'll just have a look at the abstract first, which normally gives good general overview of the paper. And so in this specific paper, they were looking at examining the welfare of elephants in zoos, specifically across North America and Europe. These probably were chosen because they have similar conditions and similar standards for welfare. And so previous to this paper, there have obviously been some studies of captive elephant welfare, as there has been for all captive zoo animals. But there hasn't really been a method in which to regularly and routinely assess their welfare. And obviously, a welfare assessment, as vets, we all know that welfare is part of one of the really, really important things, and can, like, good welfare can be preventative medicine in a way. But I'm just checking my own comments. But yeah, so what this paper set out to do was create a welfare tool that was going to, I can highlight, a welfare tool that was going to be rapid, simple to complete, and it's not going to require anything specialist. So that basically anyone around the world with facilities that are holding elephants could carry these out. And so the report in general describes, the paper in general describes how they got to this point, and all of the methods they went through to get here, and including development of a prototype, testing their prototype welfare assessment tool, and then assessing how feasible and reliable it was going to be, and then assessing each individual component of their behavioral welfare. And just to skip forward a bit, but what they've basically come up with is a list of different assessments that keepers can carry out, and it's basically, it takes 60 minutes over 3 days, and is basically routinely checking how the elephants are doing. And it's the main aim, I guess, is monitoring how the welfare might be improving if this change is made, but also if there's welfare of any one particular elephant or the herd that's declining for whatever reason, and then a vet or other interventions can be made. So again, here the abstract, at the end of the abstract, the highlighted sentence says that this paper is providing an example of how they can use this evidence-based approach to create a behavioral welfare assessment tool to be used in zoo-based research, and can obviously be applied to a range of captive species. So Niv and Izzy, I don't know if you guys had any initial comments on the paper or thoughts overall of what you liked or didn't as much.
I really enjoyed the paper overall. I thought, especially just looking at the abstract here, it pretty much described everything that was seen in the paper really succinctly, really well. And I thought it was interesting that you touched on is that it used to measure welfare over a period of time, because obviously welfare is a very dynamic state, I suppose, and especially in captive animals, and that having a tool that you can use, like you said, repeatedly and reliably to measure welfare over a period of time, because these animals can be in captivity for an incredibly long time, and not just saying this is their welfare at this point, is really important. It was clearly really extensive and thoroughly considered. I really liked that they used stakeholders within zoos, so they were contacting keepers, and like you said, the point of this was to make it simple so that the user can easily carry out these studies and this assessment. So yeah, I thought the final product overall, which is in the appendix at the end, was really good.
Yeah, absolutely. Izzy, anything to add to that?
Not really, and this is much less analytical, but if there's anything that I've learned from my minus 6 week stint in research, is that I love a succinct abstract that gives you all of that information. I love her so much for giving you all that information, and then whether you need to bother to read the rest of the paper or so I feel like the abstract just exactly lays out what they're going to talk about, where to find things, and so I just think that it's a great segue into the paper, because sometimes they're not that descriptive in their abstracts, and then you have to read more, and wasting your time. So yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. Like also, obviously, this paper is open access, but there are papers that you have to purchase or pay a fee to read, and obviously, if the abstract's not good enough, you're not going to read it. So, moving on to the introduction, and basically, it starts off with saying that the modern welfare assessment tool has obviously been quite a big focus in providing good and correct animal care and doing the best we can to provide our captive animals with basically the best conditions that we can. And so routine assessment of this welfare, as Niv pointed out, like over time, is going to be super, super important for ensuring that our animals in these zoos or rescue shelters or whatever other conditions in captivity are doing as well as they possibly can be. And so previous studies have obviously focused on judging current state of welfare, but there's not been that many studies prior to this paper that have actually objectively and regularly assessed the elephant welfare needed to monitor and provide like evidence for any improvements. So again, like bouncing off what Niv said, it's not good enough for you to make a change and then the next day assess and kind of go, oh yeah, like okay, everything's improved, we can relax now. I think an overtime measure is super, super important. And yeah, I do agree. I think it's really, really good that they've involved the specialist keepers of these elephants in creating this this welfare guide, in that they kind of know, they have the experience with the elephants. They know what might be indicators, what behavioral indicators might be important, above more just the physiological and physical ones. But yeah, and so here, if you look at this bit, so they clearly identify that like the indicators that they want to use for this welfare tool should be ones that can differ between animals of worse welfare and better welfare. So obviously can't be something that is the same no matter the welfare conditions. And obviously these findings should be repeatable, and so they've tried to create a fully validated welfare tool that's going to assess all of these things. And to anyone who's learned anything about horses, I mean dogs as well, but also zoo animals are often subjected to stereotypies. So it's basically the repetitive, invariant behavioral patterns with no obvious goal or function. And in horses and things, you get things like box weaving and cribbing. And so obviously these are seen in elephants as well. And in the past, these have been used, and they still are used very much so, especially in domestic animals, as they're said to be a way of coping with stress. But once they become a habit, sometimes these stereotypies don't go away, in the sense that the horse or animal is possibly no longer stressed, but will continue displaying this behavior even after the stressor is no longer present. So stereotypies, although can be used as a way of describing stress, I think the paper points out that they reflect a historical rather than a current welfare state. And again, one of their like really important goals for this study was to find something that's going to reflect current welfare state and welfare state over time. So here there's a description, there's a table summary of basically what they mean in terms of their reliability, validity measures and what they were trying to test. And I mean, I honestly could not fault this paper. I think they've done quite a lot really, really well. But yeah, anything to comment on that before I move on, or if there's any comments from the audience?
I was just going to say, I think Peter needs to leave now. He just sent a message through. So thank you so much for coming to join us again and telling all your incredible stories again. Like, it's always a pleasure to hear from you and all of the amazing things you do. If we could just take your knowledge and give it to me, that would be wonderful. Like wireless transfer right to my brain, that would be very nice.
You know what, I promise you, I said to Roger just now, I missed the last one a month ago because I think I had a horse with colic or something, a bad colic. And then, I lost my sister last week, and Roger said to me, do I want it tonight? Do I want to, postpone it? And I said no, because I love this interaction with you ladies. It's so inspiring, and it's I know I don't stop talking, but it's because I've got a very receptive audience, and I love just sharing my knowledge with you ladies, and the audience, the wider audience out there. So I really enjoy it, and I don't know whether we can't make it a bit more often instead of once a month. I don't know. Anyway, I'll leave that with you guys.
Yeah.
Thank you again.
Have a good evening and good luck, all of you. Hope they
Enjoy your evening too.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye, ladies. Bye. Bye, Roger.
Okay. I can't see this. I can only see in the paper, obviously. So
That's okay.
we'll just move on. But yeah, so I think interestingly for me, maybe no one else cares. But so this paper, as well as they spoke to the keepers and they asked them about like the different aspects of the elephant's behavior that they thought would be relevant to include in this this welfare questionnaire, essentially. But one of the other things that they included was this qualitative behavior assessment tool, QBA, and it's quite a recent development in behavioral studies, and the aim of it is to qualitatively assess the animal's demeanor. So it's been done in donkeys and pigs and horses, and there's been a study recently doing it in captive tigers as well. But essentially it entails that the assessors assign a certain number of words to the different animals' behavior. So for example, they get shown a video, or the actual animal, they get shown, we'll just go with the video for now, of, for example, an elephant lying down for 5 minutes, and then he like stands up, walks around, and goes back to lying down. And to that they assign words such as calm, happy, at ease with the environment, stressed, anxious, nervous, in pain. And it is very much assigning human emotion to the animal. But what they then calibrated with, I guess, is that they then look at the animal's like health and actual wealth and the physical welfare indicators, and for example, and see how reliable they are. So an elephant that has is feeling poorly for whatever reason was described more often to be depressed than happy, then you know that the keepers who are assigning these words actually have quite a good idea of what the elephant might be experiencing, just from watching quite short videos. So I found that to be super interesting, because it's quite a new tool. It's been proven to work, and it does work. It's why farmers know which animals are sick before the vet does. So it does work quite well. But I just found it really interesting that they actually did include it in, because it does have some controversies and people saying that you shouldn't, and I can't say the word, anthropomorphize animals in this way, or calling it essentially not real science. But yeah, it very much is. The other thing I think was super important that this paper did really well was they considered the fact that elephants get left alone at night for quite long periods of time, and they're unmonitored. They're elephants in the wild. Free living African elephants will be they might be resting at night, but they also spend much of their night active. Whereas many of the captive elements don't have access to the outdoor enclosure at night, so they'll be confined to a smaller indoor enclosure, especially UK and US elephants, where the winter months are colder and they need to be kept inside just basically for their own welfare at that point. But although this takes up quite a lot of their day, it's not often a monitored period of time, so they might be missing welfare indicators or behaviors that are happening at night because the keeper's obviously not present. So I thought it was really good that the paper included this in part of their developing this assessment tool. If anyone wants to jump in with any thoughts on...
Yeah, sure. I was just going to say, so this is a bit of an off topic, a bit of a segue into a different thing, but I was just thinking, sometimes people have said to me, if you give them options of things that are presenting, you're putting words in people's mouths and they wouldn't necessarily have described something that way. So I don't know what you girls think about how open they should have left it, or what you thought about giving people particular words to describe something. But I don't know how they could have overcome that. I guess you've got to give people some form of structure.
Yeah, no. So I think if I'll scroll down, so sorry for the whiplash, anyone. I think in the qualitative behavior assessment tool, they do tend to start out, so it will be here. So they do tend to start out with quite a large range of words, and the way it's done is it tends to be done quite individually. So like each person will have their own set of words, and they will, if anyone writes the words peaceful or seems free from tension, it's counted to be the same as relaxed. And so they do define the words quite a bit. And obviously if someone writes not relaxed, then they do tend to like change, so that they change not relaxed to be, for example, agitated or tense, or ask for clarification. But I do agree that like this is one of the issues with qualitative behavior assessment, is that you have to define the words quite clearly, but you also have to give people the kind of like freedom to choose, because especially coming from different backgrounds, both the US and the UK, but also within those, some of those words mean slightly different things, or you may perceive them to mean slightly different things. So I think a good definition is always needed, but I don't think they came up with a definition until slightly later on, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Yeah, it just is, I guess it's just like structuring things, but I guess you've always got to like kind of channel things down into one central point in order to make any assessment or kind of produce good data in a way for a paper and things.
No, absolutely. Because like, I mean, even for me personally, like fearful and wary could mean pretty much the same thing. But the way I describe it is fearful is poised, ready to flee, or anticipating defensive. It's got defensive posture with ears, head, and body. Whereas wary is sometimes nervous, paused reactions, and like unwilling to move in or out of an area. Listening and like smelling, so it's slow and calm behavior. Whereas like fearful is quite is quite an increased basically option from that. But I think also it was really important that they got the keepers to do this, and that the keepers do know the animal's behavior already, and like Peter as well, I guess it becomes second nature to kind of assess these animals as they are, without like thinking too much about it. Like you'll look, the same thing isn't with your pets. You look at your pet one day and go, oh, something's wrong. So yeah, because I think not normally, but with some qualitative behavior assessment tools, when they're developing them, they get general public to assess, to watch the same videos or look at the same animals and assess them as well, and just see how different, for example, a keeper's opinion of the animal is to a member of the general public.
And just to touch on that as well, in the actual final assessment tool, one thing I noticed is that they ask the number of years that the keeper's been working with the elephants. And I don't know how that kind of plays back into the research, but I thought that was interesting to say, well, if is a keeper who's had 1 year versus 10 years experience with elephants a more reliable assessor, or does this particular assessment tool kind of negate that difference, so anyone should be able to use this tool regardless of their experience with elephants? I wondered whether, I don't know if that's something that's touched on in the discussion maybe later on, but that was just something that I wondered.
No, I think it's a really good point. I definitely didn't notice it. I think I think their aim was obviously to create something that would negate that effect, but it was still designed and aimed at keepers. So the assumption would be that they do have the experience with the elephants. But yeah, I think it's quite difficult to say how much they should have. I'm just going to go back up to see if we skipped over much. We'll just go back here. But yeah, okay. So when they were designing this prototype, they did a rapid review of peer-reviewed literature. And when they say rapid, it does just mean that like they did not spend 3 years reading things. But then they also had a review of non-peer-reviewed publications to see what else was out there. Plus, they asked a stakeholder focus group to identify some measures that they think would be important. So they started off with 74 potential indicators of welfare, of which like a good amount came from all of their 3 sources, and from those they for some reason made 76 unique behavioral measures. Where did they get the extra 2? We're not sure. Oh no, I see, right. 74 identified from the focus groups, 41 identified from peer-reviewed literature, and 78 from non-peer-reviewed literature. They then narrowed that down to 76 by removing anything that was duplicate or things that weren't considered a behavioral welfare measure. So then they then started off with 76, and they had the qualitative behavior assessment section, daytime behavior questionnaire, and their nighttime observations. So I think this paper does a really, really good job in like laying out the figures of showing exactly how they're doing it. They even give a time point that they started in January 2014, and like how they went through. They mention all of their animals, like exactly how you would do it if you were trying to replicate this process for, say, rhinos or hippos or cheetahs or anything else. I think if you followed this paper step by step, you would get there. You would probably need the contacts, and you would need to have access to the animals that you were looking at. But I think overall, this paper has done a really, really good job of very clearly outlining exactly what they did. And yeah, my comment there says super clear. But yeah, so we've had a look at these. This was the terms they used for their qualitative behavior assessment. And they've also got their the other two, so the daytime and the nighttime questionnaires, and they did go with like stereotypies. So basically, they asked people to describe them in quite a lot of detail. And I think this questionnaire initially took quite a lot of time from the keepers, so it was obviously great that they were volunteering their time to do this. But yeah, and things defined as comfort behavior, things defined obviously feeding, walking, activity, and all of these they would take a score basically. So they would give it like a point scale, like a numerical scale of what the elephants were, how likely they were to perform the behavior, or like how much of it they were performing. So I think they did quite a lot of like reliability testing and going back and forth. So they did some trials where the same keeper would look at the same elephants a couple of weeks apart, or they'd have 2 different keepers look at the same elephant and just see how the reliability of those 2 findings, like how accurate were those, because they then, out of those 76, anything that wasn't reliably coming up to be roughly the same between elephants, between keepers, they would remove. So if there was things that was too difficult to assess, or that was just wildly different, because obviously those measures would not be as reliable and valid.
And just to jump in there, Kat, as well, and kind of link it to what comes on later in the discussion, is one interesting term that they kind of removed was depressed, and that the keepers actually found it quite difficult to define that term, depressed, and they couldn't use it reliably. So they changed it to like alternatives like lethargic and apathetic to try and capture that, I suppose, emotional state. And again, they kind of suggest that this tool could possibly assess emotional state, but that's not really what it was being validated for. It was being validated for general welfare. But yeah, and then similarly, there were behaviours that were just less common, so they're less likely to be seen, that were taken out, which I thought was a shame, because I wondered like how actually they do affect welfare in elephants. One of them was like playing in water, and often that was occurring so rarely that it couldn't then be used in this particular study because it just didn't turn up frequently enough. But I wonder if you kind of remove some of these behaviours, whether you miss critical aspects of welfare. I just didn't know if that was, obviously, like I said, to try and validate it is really difficult if they're not occurring regularly enough. I thought that's quite interesting.
Yeah, no, I think it's super interesting. I think it is always going to be one of those kind of limitations is first of all the wording for that qualitative behavior assessment. They have to choose the words quite carefully, and they have to specify the definitions. They also then have to check that all the zookeepers understand, because otherwise it's not an issue of validity, it's an issue of misunderstanding. But I think as well, so taking out those behaviors, it's difficult to tell if the elephant doesn't want to play in water, or if you've not been looking at it for long enough. So I think, yeah, because they set out to create something that was quite rapid and could be used without it adding obviously too much hassle to their day, or whenever they were assessing this, like it wouldn't take up basically their entire day. I think it was a necessary cut, but I do think it is quite a limitation, basically, those less frequent behaviors. I think the other thing that I wanted to talk about was basically, well, obviously they created their final welfare assessment tool, and they have the this is how they validated, basically this is how they made sure it was reliable. And again, like if you wanted to go and make a behavioral welfare assessment tool for whatever captive animal, you could very easily follow the steps in this paper. I think it was super well outlined. But yeah, so this in the results and stuff, Niv, I guess this is what you were touching on, like they struggled with some of the words, and also some of the, so with qualitative behavior assessment, you do group words quite frequently, so that it's easier to like get an overall picture of inferred emotional state. Obviously not the actual emotional state because we don't know that, but inferring it. And yeah, so things like depressed were difficult for the keepers to reliably use, basically. And I think the daytime and behavior questionnaire. So basically for the daytime questionnaire, they started out with 12 questions that got assessed for the like the same keeper testing and retesting it twice, and then inter-keeper reliability as well. And so 4 of those questions they found weren't reaching acceptable levels of reliability. So obviously the interaction with water, the walking frequency, dust bathing, and then standing still frequency. And again, I think it is because they're asked to do this at quite a short period of time. It's just one of those things that are like you may be watching an elephant for 10 minutes and it doesn't move once, or you may be watching an elephant 10 minutes and it's walking for all of that time, but it doesn't mean that the first time it wasn't feeling as well, I guess. But it is definitely a shame that those can't be included, because they are obviously natural behaviors as well. So in the nighttime observations, they had 7 criteria meet that were reliable. And I honestly think the nighttime ones was something that they did was super interesting, because I think they struggled finding things to analyze, essentially. So they had to rely on quite a lot of the daytime questionnaires, because as we mentioned, the keepers aren't there at night most of the time, and wild elephant nighttime activity is so starkly different. So I think, again, the researchers here did a really, really good job putting that together. Here, this table is quite a lot of numbers, but it's basically the reliability statistics of each of their welfare tools, and all of the ones that didn't meet the reliability were rejected. So they did reject quite a lot of words, quite a lot of questions as well. Which I guess was the aim, because 76 was never going to be the end number. And just going down, so this is... So the previous table was checking reliability, and this is checking in terms of validity. And I guess, I don't know the difference there, if anyone wants to try and explain.
Would you like us to try and explain validity and reliability?
I mean, if you want, yeah, because I'm struggling.
Oh, goodness. Well, validity versus reliability. Reliability is the ability to, I believe, repeat something accurately. How that differs from validity in a way that I can define is difficult. Maybe this is a moment for Google.
I think obviously they do define it at the start of the paper, so I could scroll up, but I think in terms of like here is basically how you do have quite a broad range of measures here, but basically right, okay.
I suppose validity is how relevant the behaviour is to the welfare of the animal.
Yeah.
Maybe in this context.
Yeah. So what they were saying at the start about having a couple elephants with poorer welfare, whether that be health or just kept in different conditions, be compared. So they wanted this behavioral welfare assessment tool to be able to distinguish between elephants with poor welfare and elephants with better welfare. So the validity would basically be they would check these poor elephants against the better welfared elephants. You know what I mean. And then just see if all of their tools could distinguish between them, or at least call them equal, and weren't saying that actually the elephants in poorer conditions were having better welfare, which obviously could be the case. But they did do like more investigation into it, obviously. But yeah,
I was just looking at it, and I think validity in this case just means accuracy. And I think the difference between accuracy and reliability are easier to measure, because obviously accuracy, like if you had a bullseye, accuracy would be hitting the like middle every single time.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas reliability would be like you might not hit the bullseye every time, but you hit the same point in the kind of rings.
Yeah.
So then those would be the difference between them.
Yeah, no, that's clearer in my head anyway. But yeah, so I guess the aim was then to choose reliable and valid measures that they could use, and what they basically did was they then created this welfare behavioral tool, and it's in the appendix if anyone wants to look at it. But I think overall they did really well. They achieved their goal of creating an evidence-based behavioral welfare assessment tool for captive elephants, with these three sections of the QBA, the daytime activity, and the nighttime activity, and so taking up, I think it's 60 minutes overall, but obviously over a couple days, so that they're looking, so that again it is over time, and yeah, and repeating this every so often. I think they discuss a couple. I'm just trying to find the point. I don't know if I highlighted it or not. Probably here. Well, so basically they assessed basically I think 48% of the UK's population of elephants, which is obviously huge, and that's incredibly good, because a lot of studies with captive animals or wild animals will struggle to make up numbers, numbers that are going to make the sample size sufficient, or actually the results statistically significant. So I think they did really, really well there. And what they were saying though is that the only a small, I think out of the 49%, only a small proportion were males. So the behavioral tool that they've produced could be skewed towards female behavior if there are like sex differences in the behavior. But it is reflective of the male population, the elephant population in the UK. So I think like it is appropriate. Like, yes, there's a limitation, and ideally you'd have 50-50, but I think it's pretty good. And yes, they did say some of their measures were not reliable or not valid in all contexts. So they want further work to investigate other ways to assess those particular behaviors and maybe determine their significance. So I think things like the walking frequency or standing still frequency would be one of those. I think there's obviously more in the paper and stuff, but to roughly wrap up, I think they did quite a lot. They obviously had the time and the funding to do this and stuff, but I think they did really, really well in creating this tool. I think they've done a really good layout of the paper in the paper and stuff, and really clearly pointed out exactly what they did and how they did it, and how anyone else could replicate it quite easily. I think the future directions, kind of like if you were an elephant keeper or elephant vet or any of that, the future directions kind of be to take this and implement it into your own zoo or your own practice, and I think it'd be really interesting to see if this translates to wildlife, or how closely it will, or how many other parameters would be valid. Niv and Izzy, I don't know if you guys have had any more closing remarks while I just scroll through and see if there's something else I wanted to say.
For me, just to bounce off what you said, not only can it be employed like to elephants in different settings across the world, but also to different species. I know that they've suggested at the very end there it could be employed to develop a similar tool for like other species, or even in an aquarium setting, which I thought was really interesting. So it just opens the door really to further studies.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And obviously, like, this information that they collect from these welfare tools and stuff can be used to determine impact of the changes in husbandry, if they make any changes to the management, and help improve the welfare and actually confirm that it's being improved in that way. But I think it'd be super interesting to see this in a clinical setting or in a hospital setting. The measures would obviously be different because there'd be a stressed animal and obviously a sick animal, but I think it'd be really cool to see. But yeah, I'm going to stop sharing. There.
Oh, fantastic article. Thank you so much, Kat, for doing that. I think anyone watching this on replay, feel free to post questions, even if you're watching a replay, and we can get back to you. So wherever you're watching this, if it's one of the society pages or if it's on the Expedition Project website, feel free to post questions. We always get back to you. Also, we'd love to see you sending in some articles you want us to talk about and then put out to everyone. So please, send through anything you've either read or you come across, or feel free to do a little search yourself if there's a particular topic you want to speak about. But that was a really good one. Thank you for organizing that. Thank you so much.
Thank you everyone for listening. Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Well, Any final thoughts from you, Izzy?
No, it's been a great evening listening to everyone. Listening to Dr. Peter Rogers again. So it'll be exciting to hear from him again next month. And then with the paper, hopefully the stakeholders in animal welfare will take it into their own hands to improve that. But apart from that, if you haven't heard about the conference, then it would be great to have as many people come along as possible. It's a fundraising event and the lineup of speakers is so incredible. So if anybody has made it this far, it would be great for you to come along and see what it's about. So those are my final thoughts.
Thank you so much. And that conference, you got to go and check that out. It's looking like it's going to be absolutely amazing, and definitely like no conference that I've seen online before, so it's going to be really exciting. Any final thoughts from you, Niv?
Seems tonight has been an elephant-heavy stream, so I hope everyone loves elephants as much as we do. But no, it's been fantastic to discuss the journal. I think it's an aspect of just conservation and science that's really important to go through, and assess these new bits of research that are coming out. So thanks for leading that, Kat, and I'm really, really looking forward to the conference.
Yeah, fantastic job leading that, Kat. Thank you so much. Any other final sort of bits from you?
Thank you, thank you both for helping as well, and for all the hosts and to Peter tonight. I know he's off now, but just looking forward to the conference. I think it's going to be incredible, and looking forward to the next live stream and seeing everyone there.
Brilliant. Okay, well, thank you everyone who's watching. Thank you obviously to all you guys. Our next planned live stream, the first Tuesday of the month, so the next one is going to be on the 4th of May. It's been amazing that's now going to be the 10th one we've done already, so it's incredible that we've gone through so many of those. They've been absolutely fantastic. So keep collaborating, keep sending through your thoughts and comments. Thank you so much for watching. If you're watching this in replay, please feel free to post any comments or questions or thoughts, and we'll get back to you. From me, goodbye. Thank you very much, everyone, and thank you, Izzy, Kat, and Nirvana. See you next time. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.